Innovation is the lifeblood of tomorrow's successful businesses. Esther Orioli is the President and CEO of Qmetrics. Esther, you've done a lot of work in the area of innovation and creativity. Where do you come from in terms of this topic?
Well, we have been working predominantly in the area of mapping creativity and innovation. So we have been looking at how do you define it, what are the particular elements or components that would go into creativity and innovation, what is it related to in the workplace, why is creativity and innovation important?
How do you define it?
We've been working very extensively with the Stanford Business School. They have a program that was created by Dr. Michael Ray and his group called Creativity in Business. And working with Michael and his team, we have been looking at a very unique definition of creativity. It's a whole person perspective, if you will. It takes all of the creative power in the body and puts it together with the intellect to be able to not only be musical, artistic, or come up with interesting new ideas, but to live your life in a creative, innovative kind of way. So on the personal level, we talk about creativity as being a whole person experience, using intuition, idea generation, being able to listen to that other voice in the body that tells us what do we want, what do we need right now, and to incorporate that in our work and also in how we define ourself. Who is the self?
Now, are some people just lucky enough to be born creative? Is this something that you can develop?
Everybody is born creative. Our culture has done its darndest to drum it out of us.
Like, in what way?
All kinds of studies. You take kids who are 4 years old, 3, 4, 5 years old, and you give them these tests, and 90% of them rate at the genius level. Right? Now you test them again at 7, 8, 9. Okay? You find out that 20%, 15% are at the genius level. Well, what happened in between 4 and 5 and 7 and 8 years old? And that is that they became enculturated in our society and through school and through different kinds of organizations and family and community systems and learned not to pay attention to that. So what happened is that we have to rediscover. It's not something we have to develop at all because it already is there. We just have to let it be there and reawaken
so
it.
what has happened to the little 5-year-old boy or girl? Give me some examples of what happens to get the creativity drummed out of them.
Well,
do they get punished in the playground because they've,
that's the age they
drawn
start
a pretty
school.
picture?
They start school, and
Yeah.
right from school you start learning about, and not all schools, but in general, big supporter of education. But it's the first thing that happens to us is we start to work in large group systems. And so in those kinds of systems, not unlike what happens to us in corporate environments, conformity becomes more valued than creativity. And then all of a sudden, as an adult, you're in a situation where you've conformed or done what the expected thing would be, and all of a sudden your supervisor says to you, "We're going to give you free reign now, and we would just go ahead and like you to be as creative as you can be, as possible." And all of a sudden they're like, "Well, how do I do that?" So they have to go back. They have to remember that 5-year-old, and they have to remember, well, how did I used to play? Okay? When you think about play, you think of taking risks. Okay? I would do anything at 5 years old. Well, what do you care? You're going to try it. You're going to experiment it. I wouldn't do that at 40-something.
It's funny you should mention risk-taking, because I heard a wonderful interview some years ago with the person who ran the research laboratories at 3M. Oh. And of course the research laboratories at 3M, as many other research laboratories, are trying to come up with new products. So they're very much trying to encourage innovation. And this person was saying that his biggest problem as a manager was that his staff, these scientists, didn't want to make mistakes. And that his single role as a manager was to encourage people to make mistakes. And I remember when I heard that, I thought, wow, that's a really unusual idea. Now, is that just research laboratories, or to what extent is this an idea that is also relevant for insurance companies, for airlines, for other sorts of businesses?
I think one of our toughest challenges is to get people out of the relentless pursuit of perfection. What happens is that somehow we entertain the myth that there's a perfect answer, and therefore we're not going to try to reach it until all of a sudden, we are perfect, and then we don't have to make those mistakes. Your 3M example, I think, is a perfect one, because they stand for innovation as a best practices company, in the world, and they have tremendous difficulty of allowing people and helping people to get to that creative innovation side. When we look at things like emotional intelligence, for example, we say that there are 3 driving forces for emotional intelligence around competitive advantage, because we're working with corporations. And one of those is creating the future. When you look at creating the future, you have to look at how do we come up with new market ideas? How do we come up with products that do something better than we did it last time before? What is that about? And that is about being able to put unlike things together. You have to be a multivariate thinker as opposed to a linear thinker, so that you can say, let's put two things that have no meaning to each other together and see what we come up with. But it's, you have to risk embarrassment, you have to be able to be spontaneous, you have to not care if somebody laughs at you, okay, if that happens.
And so if we're talking about leaders trying to encourage innovation, presumably they need to lead by example in the sense that they need to be comfortable doing this.
It's the only way.
Are they generally?
The leaders? Some are. Some are.
Most?
I would say not. I would say not. Many leaders that I know are privately creative, all right? And I don't mean artistic or musical ability. I mean, how does one think about moving into the future? How do you create the future? How can you think of what the next generation is going to want and need? How do you incorporate internet into what you do? How do you understand global economies so that you can not do business the same old way? And this is what leaders are faced with, which I think there's been a resurgence of interest in creativity and innovation, particularly when you look at organizations in their research departments, their new product departments. You know, how do we make better detergents? How do we make recyclable packaging? How do we roll our sleeves up and create futures for companies?
I'd like to look not so much at those obvious areas of innovation, but really the more mainstream business activities. I'm an insurance company. We're trying to look at a new administrative system. We're trying to be innovative in those kind of really mainstream functions.
Yes.
What are some suggestions that you can make that can help people develop innovation and creativity in that kind of arena?
Consider many options before you make a decision. So when you're thinking about how are we going to do this, don't look just to the past, okay, for the answers. And I think many organizations do that. They think past performance is an indicator of future performance. And while to some degree that's true, we have to release that, throw it away, and start to think of the what ifs, okay? Start to ask yourself, well, what if, and what if, and what if, and see whatever comes up, and don't judge it. Just go ahead and see what's there. I also am hearing and studying what happens when many people put their ideas together. So we're not only going from a time of getting out of conformity into creativity, but having many people contribute to the creative process simultaneously.
How does that tie in, though, with the conformity issue? I mean, does not getting many people together tend to lead to desires for people to conform to one another's views or to go with the mainstream?
Well, I think that that's one of the things that has to be released. You have to let go of that.
How do you do that?
Yeah. It really depends on the culture within an organization. As an individual, okay, I can tune in to what I consider to be the most cherished and valued things that I am. So who am I? Okay, not what do I know how to do, but who am I? What is my particular strength? What kind of faith do I have in my own ability to come up with an answer when there doesn't seem to be one available? How able am I to brainstorm options and solutions, even though they may sound totally ridiculous, okay, to somebody else? So individually, if I start there, and then organizationally, if we can have systems and structures that say, we want you to take risks, which means we aren't going to punish mistakes. We're not even going to point them out in some cases, except to learn from them. And if you don't make a mistake this week, you haven't served us very well. So if we start to shift that, I think that organizations and individuals can come together and start to be less afraid. You know, corporate leaders no longer want just our bodies. They want our hearts and our minds and our souls to show up at work. So we have to create the systems where, you know, we have the freedom to do that there.
Do you think the vast majority of people are creative in some areas of their life, or area of their life, and that it's a matter of trying to unleash that and broaden it out into other areas?
I don't think most people think of it that way. I think that while it's very true and we have this inherent skill and capacity within us, that if you were to ask most people if they think they're creative, I don't think they would say that they are.
But what I find fascinating is that you can see somebody in one role in their life,
Yes.
and you would never think of them as an innovative or creative person, and all of a sudden you discover some other area of their life, and it might be an obvious example like music or art or something more subtle,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you see this almost totally different
Totally
person.
different person.
Do you find that that's common?
Yes.
Now, how do you get people to realize that they can take the very abilities and qualities in this one arena and transport it to another part of their life?
I think the first thing that they have to do is to just acknowledge that their creativity continues to live within them. okay, however dull that light might have become over the years, and to begin to polish it up. Okay, to begin every day to trust that it's there and to call on that creative energy in the body. Right? So I think that that's number one way to do it. I think the other way to do it is to simply put yourself into risk-taking positions and let yourself see what happens. So to really just trust it, to have faith that it's there, and to begin to develop it in a different way than maybe you had before.
Do you think that people can actually learn to become better risk takers by, as you say, putting themselves in risk-taking situations, realizing that it's not that bad, things, even if things go wrong, it's not that bad, it's not as if you're going to die? Do you think people can kind of become almost immune to fear?
I think that fear was exactly the place that I was going to go with it, because that's what gets in the way. We worry more about what it's going to look like or what's going to happen or what are we going to do than actually is worth it. So if we're able to confront the fear and try little steps, okay, don't leap right in, all right. So if you're, most people are terrified of speaking in front of groups, okay. So don't have 1,000 people be the first speech you ever give, But try it in front of the family dinner, or bring a group of colleagues together, and just look at what the fear is and where it comes from, and just trust that it's not about how much you know. Okay, but it's intuitively about how able you are to just be present in the moment and let your creative energy and power take care of you.
Finally, a very bottom line question. What sort of evidence or research has there been that where individuals and organisations do unleash this sort of power, that it does actually translate into organisational business bottom line results?
Well, there's been a lot of skepticism, I believe, on the part of corporate leaders, and particularly those who are interested in bringing these kinds of programs into the workplace. If I can't prove the bottom line results, then most organizations aren't going to do it. What we've been able to do with our mapping and measurement systems is to tie increases in creativity, innovation, intuitive flow, play states, etc., to the bottom line things that matter to these companies, and rightfully, I think. So they're looking at, how many new and creative products are we bringing to market this year? How many products that didn't kind of make the mark, how can we take them back, not lose the investment we already have in them, and do something different so that they're able to meet the need that the customer or the client wants. We're also looking at how do service organizations creatively come up with ideas so that they are attracting new clients on a consistent basis, because they are the ones who come up with the ideas. Right? So we're looking at actually tying all of these different measures to the bottom line results for the corporation.
And you're finding a connection?
And we're finding tremendous connections. It's so exciting, because I didn't know what the answer was before we started. I didn't know where those kinds of differences would appear. And it seems to be appearing in 7 or 8 very distinct areas.
Esther Orioli, thank you.
Thank you, Peter.